So last night I went to watch Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is the 20th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and is the sequel to 2015's Ant-Man. And it was the biggest disappointment I've seen all year so far. I'm going to start with things that I like, because I like to stay positive. The VFX on the quantum realm and on the ghost fluctuation that she does were very well done. I like them a lot. There's a couple of shots where the ghost fluctuates and like she'll move, but you can see like the shadow of her face from the previous shot. I like that. I like the stuff with the quantum realm. Paul Rudd is good. Paul Rudd is always good. I like Paul Rudd a lot. He's good as Scott Lang. Scott's friends, Michael Pena and T.I. and the Russian dude, are funny, just like they were in the first one. They're good. Scott's daughter isn't annoying, which is about the best compliment I can give to a child actor. But honestly, other than that, it all pretty much falls apart. And a lot of the problems are traced back to the script. This is a really, really poor script, which is surprising because two of the writers are the ones who just did Spider-Man Homecoming, which is a pretty good script. This is one of the worst written Marvel films ever. It's one of the worst written, definitely since Thor: The Dark World. The plot makes no sense at all. Every character is completely one note and has one defining characteristic, and that's it. Every scene is a giant exposition dump. No one except Scott really talks like a real person, and the villain is just god-awful with no development. I don't blame any of the actors for their bad performances, because there's a lot of talented people in here. Paul Rudd, Michael Douglas, Evangeline Lilly. I don't blame any of them for their bad performances, except Hannah John-Kamen, who plays the villain, Ghost. Her delivery would have been bad in any movie. It just was not a good script. It's really that simple. I don't blame any of the other people. I think they're just their talents were wasted because the writing was not up to par. And I can't really go into anything more in detail that I want to go into without spoiling the movie. So if you don't want to have the movie spoiled, just skip to this part in the video. Anyways, I liked the Walton Goggins character quite a bit. I thought he did a good performance. Basically, he's like a black market technology dealer. But I couldn't help but think throughout the entire movie, why isn't this just Justin Hammer? I like Walton Goggins. I would have rather watched Sam Rockwell. I mean, you know, he went to prison after the events of Iron Man 2. He's probably out by now. It's been like 8 years. Why not have him come back in some way? Ghost's backstory is that her father was experimenting with the quantum realm and made a portal to it or something, and he tried to get her out of there. She went back because she was worried about him and ended up being exposed to the quantum realm radiation, and now she fades in and out of existence, basically. I don't understand why she wasn't just Laurence Fishburne's daughter, because Laurence Fishburne's character, he comes in and he tries to help her from long, long ago, and he's still trying to help her today. Why isn't it just his daughter? Why do you need a convoluted backstory of how he got to meet her? And why is Michelle Pfeiffer there? She's given 3 minutes of screen time in the beginning of the movie to get you to care about her, but you don't care about her because you don't know anything about her. You don't really care whether Hank is able to find her or not. And for the brief amount of time that she's in the movie, she doesn't feel like she has any real connection to Hank, and I can't help but wonder why they didn't just cast Catherine Zeta-Jones, who's Michael Douglas's wife in real life, who he wanted them to cast. I don't understand why they didn't do that, because at least you would have had an authentic romantic connection and romantic bond there. Ant-Man and the Wasp isn't about Ant-Man or the Wasp. It's basically about Hank Pym trying to find Janet, and that's unfortunate because this is a story you don't care about, because you're not given any reason to really care about Hank Pym as a character. It's structured like Scott Lang should be the main character, but for whatever reason, because he's the one that you give they give the development to, but for whatever reason, Hank Pym is the focus of the story and the search for his wife. And it just doesn't work, especially when everybody else's opinion of Hank Pym in the story is that he's a bad guy and he just wants to take all the credit for everything. So he doesn't come off as a likable person. And Michael Douglas tries his best, but there isn't much for him to work with. The Wasp is another problem that this movie has. Evangeline Lilly tries her best to make the Wasp an interesting character, but it just doesn't work. She's written like a complete bitch for the whole first act of the movie, and then isn't developed beyond that. So when her and Scott get together again, it's not believable because you haven't set them up as being interested in each other again that well. The only real interactions they had outside of when the action was happening later in the film is where she's bitching at him and she's mad that he left. And it's understandable, but they never move beyond that stage from a writing perspective. Paul Rudd is at least really likable. Everything Paul Rudd does, he's really likable in it. He tries his damnedest to make this movie work. And there's just not much he can do because he doesn't have that much to do in the movie. It's the same thing with Michael Pena and his friends. They try, but they're so poorly written, and they actually come off as stupid for a lot of it. They do things that don't work in the context of the story and don't make any sense and actually damage the mission. Like Scott telling Luis to come to the lab when he knows that he can't do that, or things like that just make this movie just drag on, and it just doesn't work. So the whole plot, really the big problem, the whole plot revolves around Ghost wanting to get Janet before Hank does, so that she can absorb Janet's energy and get healthy again. Because apparently this is the only way to do it, because you have to get quantum energy to reverse the quantum energy that's making Ghost fade in and out of existence. And it will also most likely kill Janet. So this is why Hank and the Wasp want to stop Ghost from doing this. But Laurence Fishburne says that he and Hank can figure out a solution. And when Janet comes back, she just touches Ghost's face and heals her in like 2 seconds, and everything's fine. So there was no point of any of this. It makes the entire story feel completely pointless. The 3 things I liked most about the original film was the action, the way the action was shot, the jokes, because the jokes in the first film really landed, and what they did with the big versus small environment, how they had small stuff become big stuff become small, but there's really none of that. The action is worse this time. It's not as well done, especially the practical action. It looks so fake. The jokes don't land. They're missing that Edgar Wright and Adam McKay wit that they brought to the original script. You can tell which parts of the movie were written by the Spider-Man team and which ones were written by the other hack writers. But some of the jokes fall so flat that they're on there with the "what are those" bit from Black Panther, where you just physically facepalm because the jokes are so terrible. And there's a few that are really good. There's a few that do really land. But most of them, it's just not up to par with the second one. I mean, with the first one, excuse me. And they really don't do anything with this big versus small atmosphere. There's a couple visual gags, like when pigeons are pecking at the tiny car, and at the end when they make the Hello Kitty Pez dispenser giant, and then Michael Pena has a cringeworthy line of "you just got pezzed," and they don't do anything else with it. It's just they go big and they go small, and nothing really happens. They don't use that environment to the film's advantage and give it a visual flair. The cinematography and the production design are very drab. It's very much falling back to the way Marvel films used to be, where they were all set in these bland environments. There was no visual flair to them, and it's disappointing because we just saw very visually interesting movies in Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor Ragnarok, and even Black Panther. And I have a lot of problems with the set design in Black Panther, but at least it was more colorful than this. So I hope Marvel isn't falling back into their old ways. I really thought they had turned a corner and were going to make things more visually interesting, but they're starting to fall back into the old stuff. It was just really disappointing. All I'm hoping for at this point is that if they do make an Ant-Man 3, that it can at least be the Thor Ragnarok of this franchise, where the first two are not really that great, but the third one is really, really well done. I would say bring Edgar Wright back in to do the Ant-Man movie he always wanted to make, but I think that bridge is burned, even though I would absolutely love to see it. I mean, bring somebody else. Bring in Shane Black or Tim Miller or Phil Lord and Chris Miller. You know, go for a Nice Guys or 21 Jump Street vibe and really use Paul Rudd's comedy talents for all that they're worth, and just do a more contained story that doesn't involve this crazy plot about the quantum realm. That's what I would want to see from an Ant-Man movie. Just make a fun action comedy. And they tried in the first one to do that and just were somewhat successful. And they did not try at all to do that in this one. This movie was a huge disappointment for me personally. Overall, I give the movie a 4 out of 10. It's competently made. Paul Rudd is good in it, and he tries everything he can, and I like to reward effort. I liked Walton Goggins in it. There is some really great effects, and I got a few unintentional laughs out of it, but everything else just is either mediocre or bad, and it doesn't live up to the first one. It was just a big disappointment. Definitely, if you're a Marvel fan, you'll probably like it. I consider myself a fan of Marvel too, but not enough to make excuses for bad filmmaking or what I perceive as bad filmmaking. But if you're a Marvel fan, you'll probably at least enjoy it. And I recommend seeing it if you are a completionist of the Marvel films and you really want to see every one. But I can't really recommend it for anything outside of that. It doesn't even really connect to the bigger universe as a whole. It doesn't change anything. Post-credit scene was a nice little visual joke, though. I enjoyed that quite a bit. All in all, if you want to watch something interesting this weekend, go watch Hereditary again. That's way better than this. I imagine Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, even though I haven't seen it yet, is probably better than this too, even though it didn't look that good. But yeah, just skip it unless you're a big Marvel fan. It's quite a disappointment.